Welcome to Unit 5 of the TESOL course at Southern Utah University. In this video, we'll talk about what it means to know a word. We'll try to answer these three questions. What is a word? How many words does a learner need to know? And what does it mean to know a word? In the recent videos, we've been talking about the four language systems. We've previously discussed pronunciation system, and in this unit we are discussing the vocabulary system. Teachers need to understand these systems so they can explain them well to their students. What is a word? If you had to give a definition for this, what would you come up with? The answer to this question can depend on how we define the meaning of the word word. Some linguists use this term, lema. A lema can be described as sort of a head word. Think of this as the word that you would see in a dictionary. A head word may have different variations of that word below it. So most linguists would describe a word as a lema, meaning a head word. And if you know the head word, you know the words below it. Here's some examples. If you know the word shoe, then you know the plural form shoes. If you know the verb go, then you probably know these conjugations, goes, going, gone, and went. If we think about words as these lemas, then how many words does a student need to know? Well, some estimates suggest that in the red there, for basic survival in English, we need to know at least 2,000 words or word families. To be fluent, though, and carry on conversation and really participate in one's community, we need to have at least 6,000 words. And this is actually the number of words that most new international students to the United States tend to have when they start university study. However, some estimates suggest that in order to be successful at university study, we need at least 9,000 words. So a lot of our international students have this deficit and really need to work hard to improve it. Similar studies suggest that native English-speaking students arrive at university with at least 15,000 word families. Now that they've got a lot of words that maybe not are necessary for university study, and they need to learn a lot more words that are more specialized. But in general, we do need a lot of words to function in daily life, and even more if you want to pursue academic or professional studies. What does it mean to know a word? Well, here's some of the ways that we can say that we know a word really well. So the first is we know its morphology. Morphology, as we mentioned, is the word parts. A morpheme is the smallest unit of meaning in a word. And so if we know morphology, we know the things like root words, we know what prefixes and suffixes are and what they mean. And so then we can start uncovering more about what that word means and how the word parts create that meaning. We also know its pronunciation. We know how the word is pronounced when we want to speak it. We can recognize it when we hear it. We know its spelling. We can recreate the word when we write it down, and we recognize it when we see it. We understand its meaning, and not just one meaning, but possibly multiple meanings. For example, the word head we would say a polysemous word. Polysemous means it has many meanings. And so one word could carry many different meanings even though it has the same spelling. So knowing a word is understanding the differences between those meanings. And that's related to the next way of knowing a word, which is its grammar and usage. When we see a word, do we understand what its grammatical category is? Is it a noun, a verb, an adjective, or something else? And do we know how to use it appropriately in different situations, especially if it's a word that has multiple meanings? Do we know its collocations? A collocation, and we can use our morphology to guess at the meaning of this. Co means with, location means place. So in the same place. A collocation is a neighbor word, a word that happens usually before or after our target word, and we know how those words work together. So for example, when we use this verb, we always know that it's almost always used with this particular preposition. Or when we use this kind of adjective, we know that it fits with certain nouns, but it doesn't fit well with other nouns. So those are understanding collocations can help us understand a word better. And lastly, frequency. Is this a very common word, or is it a rare word in English? Knowing whether a word is frequent or not can let us know whether it's going to be easily understood by others or whether we're choosing a word that's very specialized for a particular reason. So these are just some of the many ways it means to know a word. But knowing a word isn't just knowing its meaning, it's knowing all of these things. This brings us to the idea of two different ways of expanding our vocabulary. One of them is through breadth. This means knowing many different words. The other way is depth. This means knowing the words that we know really, really well and knowing them in many different ways. And both of these ways of knowing vocabulary is important. We need to expand our vocabulary and learn many words, but at the same time, we can't just learn words on a surface level. We really need to go deep and understand how those words are used and how they impact our audience and how we can transform those words through morphology. So in this video, we've tried to answer the question, what is a word? Okay, we talked about the idea of a lemma. We've talked about the number of words that are needed for different kinds of contexts. And we've also talked about the different ways of going deeply and knowing words better, but also recognizing the breadth and knowing many words is also important.